Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm your host, Anthros Campbell. Today is World AIDS Day, and it is being observed under the theme Ending the HIV/AIDS Epidemic. Communities make the difference. Now, the government has implemented measures to reduce infection and stigma, provide access to medication, as well as increase public awareness about HIV and AIDS. The government also continues to collaborate with the Jamaica Aids Support for Life, an organization that has been providing support for persons living with HIV/AIDS. Today, we speak with Monitoring and Evaluation Manager of Jamaica Aids Support for Life, Mr. Xavier Biggs. Mr. Biggs, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we've heard so much about HIV and AIDS over the past years. Have people been taking heed?
The short answer to that has to be no. The virus is about 40 years in the region, and the response continues to remain relevant and needed. And so, if I were to be very honest about that, then I would have to say no. There is still so much more left to be done.
Oh, can you tell us about the global stats with HIV and AIDS?
Well, the, the truth is, close to 36 million or over 36 million people have died globally because of AIDS-related complications.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at us in Jamaica in particular, there is an estimated 32,000 plus people living with the virus.
Okay.
That is compounded by the fact that just over 27,000 know, but only about 12,300 are consistent on treatment. That means that there are several points along the way that people are falling through the cracks. And every time a person does not get tested or a person knows their status and does not access treatment, then they create or could potentially expose others to the virus.
So 32,000 persons now living with HIV and AIDS in Jamaica.
Yes, that's the newest estimate that we've revised as of September 2019.
How does that compare with the figures, say, for last year?
Well, interestingly enough, we're always improving the models that we use to do the size estimates. And so if you asked us earlier this year, maybe around May, we would have said something like 39,000. But we have added new variables, and we've sought to ensure that the method is more accurate. And so we're a little bit more comfortable with saying that 32,600 plus people are currently believed to be affected in Jamaica by HIV.
All right. So your theme for this year is how to end the epidemic. Communities make a difference.
Yes.
What are some of the approaches we can take, with that theme as a background?
If you think, let's add a practical approach to it. We all live in communities, and within that communities, we have our homes. In the confines of our homes, we are individually responsible for what we do, but there are some things that require collective action. And ending the HIV epidemic is one of those things. We have to be willing, for example, as communities, to end stigma and discrimination, because stigma and discrimination continues to be one of the leading causes of new infections globally. People are afraid to get tested. People are afraid of going in to access treatment services simply because they're afraid of what people might think or say about them. And so at the very start of the conversation, as a community, we have to rid ourselves of that stigma and discrimination component that will allow for people to be more comfortable to access treatment and be more willing to get tested.
Right. But can you believe that people would be there just because of fear, not going to get tested, not going to get treated when you're not feeling well?
Again, my role as monitoring and evaluation manager is to look at the numbers, and that's what the numbers suggest. So for example, we know that over 27,000 people know their status. But we know that we've only ever seen 18,000 plus of those in a treatment site, and just over 12,000 thereabout continue to access treatment in an ongoing kind of way. What this means is that people are shying away from the system, and that is problematic for us. And so, yes, people are fearful of what people might think, what people might say, because HIV continues to be one of those heavily stigmatized viruses that we experience today.
Okay. What are some of the activities that you have planned for World AIDS Day this year, which is today?
Every year we have a series of community-based activities. And so for us at the Jamaica Aids Support for Life, we've been in a series of communities all week. providing sensitization sessions, doing testing, and also just spreading the message of effective management of HIV. Today is really the big day in terms of World AIDS Day. It was a day that was set up back in 1988, and we use that every year to sort of pay homage to the life and legacy of those who would have passed on, but also celebrate the resilience of those who are still living. So as a staple in our calendar, we have our annual candlelight vigil, and that takes place tonight at the Carter Hall in Halfway Tree, 77 Halfway Tree Road. And that is an event when we pretty much come together to recognize and celebrate the lives of persons living with and affected by HIV and
So
AIDS.
some persons have lived for many years with the disease, right?
Yes.
So people should really come forward to get tested and get treated.
You know, as the technology increases, as our understanding of the viruses increase, we have optimized treatment so that people can live healthy, normal lives for as long as they're willing to adhere and do what is required.
Like other
So people are
diseases, yes.
exactly. If people are outliving people that don't have HIV with the virus simply because where the science has gotten to, if you take your meds as prescribed, then you can live healthy, normal lives.
Tell us what called you to action in 1991 when you started this entity.
Well, the organization, I tell people all the time, I think the Jamaica Aids Support for Life in its current form, we are our ancestors' dream. Back in 1991, a virus had entered the Jamaican space that we knew absolutely nothing about. We just knew that our friends and the people that were close to us were dying, and we needed to provide a solution. The solution we hoped to provide back then was a sort of final care service. So, our makeup started with a hospice. At that point, we just wanted to ensure that as people transitioned, they transitioned with dignity. If you fast forward to where we are now, there is significantly less demand for that kind of service because people don't have to die from HIV anymore. And so our program has diversified into prevention programs, treatment programs, enabling environment programs. And so we are today so much more than we originally started out to be.
Yes. People do not have to die from HIV. This is such an interesting and important conversation, but we have to take a break now. More when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Get the Facts. We're talking HIV and AIDS with Monitoring and Evaluation Manager at the Jamaica Aids Support for Life, Xavier Biggs. Tell us now about some of the services that you offer.
HIV is measured on what is known as a continuum of care. It starts with prevention all the way through treatment and onto what is known as viral suppression. And we at Jamaica Aids Support for Life have what we call a comprehensive health and case management model that walks persons along that entire cascade depending on where they are. So we do that under 3 pillars. There is our prevention programming, there's our treatment programming, and there's our enabling environment and human rights component. So let's look at each one. So prevention looks primarily at testing to diagnosis. We have a mission to ensure that as many persons as are willing and as many people as possible get tested and know their status, because this is really and truly the first and foremost important thing that needs to happen. Beyond that, we provide treatment services for those who are diagnosed. Now, we have found, for example, that treatment services should not be confined to just the medical component. And so our treatment program has an entire psychosocial element. There is an available psychologist, a social worker, a nutritionist, an adherence counselor, and we have other programs such as our educational programs, etc. Because we understand that people do not live single issue lives. And so treatment should be a more holistic, or take a more holistic approach to that. Now, beyond that, we also have enabling environment and human rights pieces. We are very, very clear that the legislative framework is not necessarily where it needs to be. and that it needs to be more inclusive and supportive of persons living with HIV to promote access. And so that pillar of the organization continues to advocate for, lobby with partners to ensure that we are creating a safe space for people to access testing and access treatment services in. So we cover that entire continuum of care.
Okay, good stuff. Tell me about prevention now. How can we prevent this disease?
You know, the first and most potent one, which is something that we actually, which is something that we actually promote, is condom use. Condom use continues to be one of the most effective forms of prevention. Now, I'm very, very well aware that sex without a condom might be more entertaining and might be more pleasurable for a lot of people. But the reality is, because we have a virus that we are contending with, condoms continue to be one of the most effective ways of doing that. We also understand that there is a particular thrill that goes with multiple partnerships. But data also says that people who are in monogamous relationships tend to do better relative to avoiding HIV transmission. But because we know that there are variances in how this may appear, then condom use continues to be the most potent recommendation. And beyond that is getting tested frequently and knowing your status. Those things are very, very important to the message of prevention.
Yes, and no group is more at risk than any other.
You know, risk is an interesting conversation because risk really comes back to sexual behavior. And so, yes, there are groups that are going to be at higher risk because of sexual behaviors. So, nationally, the prevalence is 1.6%, between 1.6 and 1.8%. But if you divide the country into smaller groups, persons of trans experience, men who have sex with men, sex workers, girls 10 to 19, men 15 to 24, people in multiple partner relationship, then you start realizing that the statistics will change and differ and will require a different targeted approach when engaging them.
Right. Okay. I know that we've talked about this and people should know, but what are the symptoms? What should I look out for?
You know, I love to hate this question. The truth is, HIV has no symptoms that are unique to it. If you think about having a flu or a fever, they all have, the same symptoms. And so there is no telltale sign to say this person has this symptoms and therefore it must be that they have HIV. The body responds differently when foreign viruses or illness affect it. And so with that, you may see different or experience different manifestations, and everybody is different. The other thing with the symptom conversation as well is that you have to remember that what HIV does, or when it becomes AIDS, is that it breaks down your immune system so that other things can kill you or impact you. So it's never actually the HIV or AIDS that kills a person or impacts them in that kind of way. It's how it compromises the immune system so that something else will. So there are no set or specific symptoms to HIV and AIDS.
So the key thing to do is get tested like once per year or?
We generally recommend once every 6 months.
Once every 6 months.
But there are people who are at higher risk because of their sexual behaviors, and we might recommend frequency as every 3 months or every 6 months, depending on risk exposure.
Okay, what are your targets as it relates to stemming the epidemic?
Targets, well, so globally, there are some numbers that I generally want us to remember. 90, 90, 90. This is 90% of people infected knowing their status, 90% of that being on treatment, and 90% of that being virally suppressed. That's a global target set by UNAIDS that we want all countries around the world to achieve by 2020. We want to take those numbers to 95, 95, 95 by 2030, which again is 95% of those infected know their status, 95% of that number being on treatment, and 95% virally suppressed. That viral suppressed number is key because viral suppression is when the virus is pretty much so low in your system that you are unable to transmit, providing that you maintain your treatment regime, etc. And in that state, undetectable is what you're aiming for, and that equals untransmittable.
Right. Where are we, Jamaica, specifically?
Well, Jamaica's numbers are a little less than we'd want them to be right now. We are at 84 on the first pillar.
Not so bad.
Not so bad. We're getting to that 90 with a
Yes.
year to go.
Yes.
The second pillar is where we've had the massive fall off because people are knowing or learning about their status but not getting on treatment.
Yes.
And so that at that point we fall to between 47 and 50%, and beyond that we go to 62%. So we really do have some work to do over the next couple of months if we want to achieve those 90-90-90 targets for 2020, and if we really want to end the epidemic by 2030.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the collaboration with government and how are you funded?
So the government has been a partner of the Jamaica Aids Support for Life for as far back as I can remember. And this is important because when you come to HIV is what is called a class 1 illness. And so the government of Jamaica has an interest in knowing or being made aware of those impacted by the virus. But separate and apart from that, the government also has an interest in ensuring that the entire Jamaican population is healthy. And so every player, like ourselves as civil society partners involved in the response, is collaborating with the government of Jamaica in ensuring that we curb the epidemic. Also, because we operate treatment sites, we want to ensure that we are also operating by the same standard operating procedures that are required for HIV management.
Yes.
And so we use the same clinical management of HIV documents. We operate through multiple partnerships around biohazard waste disposal. We adhere to the guidelines that surround the management of test kits. All the pieces that are required by the government of Jamaica that help us to support our clients are in place. And the government remains consistent in their commitment to assisting us in doing that.
Good. Thank you. Your final word to us.
You know, final word. It would be get tested. Know your status, because that is right now one of the most important things you could want to do, as you'd want to know if you are, if you have cancer or anything like that. Get tested. You know, we have 3 offices across the island. We're at 3 Hendon Drive in Kingston. We're at 14 King Street in St. Anne's Bay and 16 East Street in Montego Bay. Come into our offices anytime, get tested, know your status.
Thank you so very much. Good to have you.
Thank you.
This has been Get the Facts. Our guest was the Monitoring and Evaluation Manager at Jamaica Aids Support for Life, Xavier Biggs. Until next time, I'm Anthros Campbell. Take care and get tested for HIV/AIDS.